When NBA fans discuss who the greatest player of all time is, you'll often hear the usual culprits: Michael Jordan, LeBron James, occasionally Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and even Kobe Bryant sometimes. But with all due respect, those are just Kobe stans. One name I feel gets disrespected way too much, especially when ranking the greatest basketball players is, you guessed it, Tim Duncan. At face value, Tim Duncan just looks like the typical power forward. He didn't do anything special, and he was blessed to be drafted by one of the most stable and consistent franchises in the NBA. Today, we'll be looking in depthly at Tim Duncan's career and figure out if he's truly underrated, and if he should be in the same realm of GOAT talk as Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Let's do this. Just a disclaimer, but I myself am not saying that Tim Duncan is the GOAT. But I will be taking a look at his case to see if I think that he should be considered the GOAT. For these analysis type videos, I like to explain how I go about with getting the answers. There are 6 categories I'll use to look at Timmy's case. First up, we'll have a look at Tim Duncan's accolades. Next, will be his leadership. After that, we'll take a look at his defense and offense, followed by his success. And to round it off, we'll take a look at some of Tim Duncan's most clutch performances, because let's be real, fans don't take you seriously if you can't perform in crucial moments. After that, we'll come up with our conclusion. So let's begin. I believe the most underrated part about Tim Duncan's game would have to be the sheer amount of accolades he managed to collect over the years. Tim Duncan is a 5-time NBA champion, 3-time Finals MVP, 2-time regular season MVP, 15-time All-Star, 1-time All-Star Game MVP, 10-time All-NBA First Team, 3-time All-NBA Second Team, 2-time All-NBA Third Team, 8-time All-Defensive First Team, 7-time All-Defensive Second Team, the Rookie of the Year, All-Rookie First Team, Teammate of the Year back in 2015 if you want to count it, and the number 21 is retired in his honor by the San Antonio Spurs. Clearly, there's a lot of success here, almost too much to fathom, so I decided to do what any reasonable basketball YouTuber would do. I made a graph. I compared Tim Duncan's accolades to other players that are usually in the GOAT talk conversation. I'll give you guys a second to take everything in, but from what it looks, Tim Duncan is clearly giving everyone else a run for their money, even beating some players in certain categories. Keep in mind that Tim Duncan would have the same finals record as this guy. Yeah, 6-0, if it weren't for one Ray Allen jump shot. Tim Duncan has more championships than LeBron, more finals MVPs than Kareem and Kobe, more regular season MVPs than Kobe, more All-Star appearances than Jordan, more All-NBA teams than Jordan, while also being tied with Kareem and Kobe, and the most All-Defensive Team selections from anybody on this list. I think that proves enough that Timmy has enough accolades to compete with anybody else on this list. So now let's move on to Tim Duncan's leadership. When you think of the greatest leaders in NBA history, who comes to your mind? For me, I immediately think of the likes of Bill Russell and Tim Duncan. That's it. Those are the first 2 people that come to mind, and I'm willing to bet almost all of you had Tim Duncan also coming to your mind when thinking of the greatest leaders in NBA history. Now ask yourself, why is it that I consider Tim Duncan a great leader? Maybe it's because he's won 5 championships in the span of 15 seasons. Maybe it's because he played for the same franchise and coach for 17 years, never demanded a trade, never complained, never blamed any of his teammates for a loss. Maybe it's because of the way he impacted games, not by putting up absurd numbers, but by just his sheer presence. There are countless examples, excerpts from teammates, numerous speeches from reporters or ex-NBA players praising Tim Duncan for how he led his team. Tim Duncan's just a great guy. Timmy's career has been synonymous with winning, teamwork, but mostly his otherworldly ability to bring people together and make people come closer and guide them to victory. Now that we've proven how amazing of a locker room guy Tim Duncan is, let's move on to his defense, one of the strongest aspects of his game. I don't think it's much of a controversial statement when I say that Tim Duncan is one of the greatest defenders ever. No, he's never won a Defensive Player of the Year award, but let me throw out a few statistics. Tim Duncan is 2nd all-time in blocks. He's 2nd all-time in defensive win shares, 5th all-time in defensive plus-minus, and the 3rd highest all-time for defensive rating. Those are some pretty impressive feats. When Tim Duncan retired, the San Antonio Express News put his defensive perfectly. Here's what the article said. He didn't rebound with chaotic exuberance of Dennis Rodman or levitate to swat shots into the fourth row like Dwight Howard. Duncan's defense looked effortless, like he knew what was coming, when it was coming, and how to stop it. He rarely floated more than a few inches off the ground to deter an attack or snatch a rebound. He never had to. His positioning, nimble footwork, and sneaky strength turned the Spurs into a perennial defensive powerhouse, even as the personnel around him changed throughout the years. That pretty much sums it up perfectly to me. No matter what teammates he had around him, no matter how old he was, Tim always held down the fort on the defensive end. He didn't dominate on defense because of his absurd athleticism or strength. He dominated on defense because of how well he communicated. Tim was always shouting to other teammates, watching every player on the floor, shouting out every backdoor cut, defensive lapse, or anything. But combined with his communication and leadership, he had great instincts and reaction. Tim was able to make up for other players' defensive mistakes and protect the rim with the best of them. Overall, Tim Duncan was a defensive juggernaut who was without a doubt one of the single best defensive players ever. Now let's move on to the other side of the ball, offense. Tim Duncan isn't necessarily considered an all-time great scorer. Timmy made his name mainly on the defensive end. Some critics may ask, how can Tim Duncan be the GOAT? He could never give you 30 a night like MJ, Kobe, or LeBron. No, Timmy wasn't exactly a volume scorer like the other all-timers, but think about this. The Spurs were never in the top half of the league in pace during the first 10 years of his career. For Timmy's first 10 years, he averaged 21.6 points, 11.8 rebounds, and 3.1 assists per game. When you adjust those stats for pace and look at his numbers per 100 possessions, Tim's stats at his peak increased to an absurd 31.2 points, 4.3 assists, and 17.1 rebounds a game, along with 3.5 blocks. Timmy was also one of the most consistent superstars the game has ever seen. Year after year, Duncan was consistently averaging 23 and 12, 25 and 13, 21 and 11 on 50+% shooting. For his whole career, you knew what you were getting out of him. Every night Tim Duncan was playing, he'd give you 20 and 10 with a few blocks, set up his teammates, and end the game with a 10-point win. That's just what Timmy did. An underrated part of Duncan's game was how great he was in the post during his peak. Only Hakeem Olajuwon and Kevin McHale had a greater array of moves down low than the big fundamental. He had a fadeaway, he had a little hook shot, he could spin, he could back you down, and of course he had his famous bank shot, one of the most unstoppable shots ever, up there with the likes of Kareem's skyhook and Jordan's fadeaway. Also, it's not like Duncan didn't have stretches of brilliant offensive play. In the 2002 playoffs, Duncan averaged 27 points per game. In 1999, Tim swept Shaq and the Lakers, putting up 37, 14 and 4 and 33, 14 and 4 in games 3 and 4. He also averaged 27 and 14 in the 1999 finals. In 2002, Duncan battled with Shaq and Kobe, the defending champs, carrying his mediocre supporting cast, averaging 29, 17 and 5 in a 5-game loss to LA. During a stretch of games in the 2003 playoffs, Duncan averaged 31, 17, and 6 and closed out LA with a 37, 16, and 4 game. Duncan went on to the finals that year, averaging 24, 17, and 5 that series, closing the Nets out in 6 games with his famous 21, 20, 10, and 8 performance. Duncan had no shortage of statistically great games, and no one seems to remember that. Those stat lines I just showed you should tell you that Tim Duncan was a beast on offense when he needed to be. Timmy wasn't going out to the court every night with the mindset of, I need to get 50 tonight. Tim let the game come to him, and he did what his team needed him to do. He wasn't worried about stats, he was worried about winning. And in the end of the day, I'd much rather take winning over stats. We see how players like Russell Westbrook and even LeBron James are scrutinized for putting up good numbers but not being able to win games. And now let's get on with the second last category before our conclusion. We'll have a look at Tim Duncan's success. From the moment Tim Duncan entered the league, he was a winner. In Duncan's sophomore season, Tim led the Spurs to their first championship, becoming the youngest Finals MVP ever. In 2003, Duncan willed the Spurs to the championship with little help from David Robinson, who only averaged 7 points in the playoffs, or Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and Steven Jackson, who all combined for less than 37 points per game and shot 40% combined. But here's one fact that sums up how great of a winner Tim Duncan is. He won his first championship in 1999, and won his last championship 15 years later in 2014. And even after 15 years, Tim was the best player on each of those teams. Tim Duncan was able to sustain his dominance for so long that he was able to be the best player on 2 different championship teams 15 years apart. Let that sink in. In Bill Simmons' book, The Book of Basketball, he said this about Tim's ability to win. Tim Duncan could play in any style. During the deadly slow it down, grind it out, defensive beats on offense era, Duncan won 2 championships. During the transition period as everybody adjusted to the new rules, when the NBA started to call hand checks and allowed moving picks, he won his 3rd championship. In the drive and dish, offense beats defense small ball era, Duncan won 2 more championships and excelled as one of the few guys polished enough to punish players down low and talented enough to guard quicker players on the other end. Duncan made everybody else better and came through when it mattered. That excerpt from Bill Simmons sums up how Tim Duncan was able to adjust and change his game and win in any style or any era of basketball. And has any other superstar done more with less? Jordan had Pimpin and Rodman. LeBron had D-Wade, Kyrie, and Anthony Davis. Wilt had Jerry West, Hal Greer, and Elgin Baylor. Bill Russell had Sam Jones, Havlicek, and Cousy. Magic had Kareem and Worthy. Kobe had Shaq and Pau Gasol. Timmy had a very old and out-of-prime David Robinson, and Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker, who combined for 5 and 4 All-NBA second-team appearances during their years playing with Timmy. That's it. Those are his greatest teammates. No second superstar, no one to put the team on their back and take over when Tim Duncan wasn't feeling it. Tim was just a flat-out winner. It didn't matter who he was playing with, what style he was playing, who he was playing against. He was going to win. The 5-1 record proves that. Now that we got that out of the way, it's time to take a look at Tim Duncan's most clutch performances and then come up with a conclusion. People throw out the word clutch a lot, and sometimes I question what it really means. But the more I thought about it, I came to the conclusion that my definition of clutch is a player who is trusted in big moments and isn't afraid to take shots when the game is on the line. I know that there are all kinds of advanced metrics and everything to measure how clutch someone is, but I'm not going to use all that. I'm just simply looking at Tim Duncan's ability and fearlessness to take and make shots in big moments. In Game 1 of the first round in 2008, the San Antonio Spurs are matched up against their conference rivals, the Phoenix Suns. The Suns are down by 3 points at the end of the first overtime. Manu takes it to the lane, kicks it out to Duncan, all alone at the 3-point line. Duncan sets up his shot and knocks down a huge 3-pointer to tie the game and take it to the second overtime, and the Spurs ended up winning that game and the series. In the 2004 Western Conference semifinals, the Spurs and Tim Duncan were matched up against the LA Lakers, who featured Shaq and Kobe. The series was tied going into Game 5, and the San Antonio Spurs needed a win. It was a tie game with about 1 second left on the clock. Tim Duncan got the ball at the free throw line and tossed up an unbelievable turnaround fadeaway shot around an outstretched arms of Shaquille O'Neal to take the lead. Yes, after this shot, Derek Fisher hit an infamous game winner with 0.4 seconds left on the clock. But to me, that doesn't take away from how clutch of a shot Tim Duncan hit. The game was on the line. The Spurs trusted Tim to take and make the shot, and he did just that. If not for D-Fish, that shot would have gone down as the single greatest game winner of all time. But if you still aren't convinced that Timmy is clutch, how about Game 6 of the NBA Finals versus the New Jersey Nets? The big fundamental put up one of the most dominant performances of all time, putting up 21, 20, 10, and 8. This stat line is truly unbelievable, especially when you put into context that he put that performance with the championship on the line. Even on the biggest stages, Tim Duncan showed up and had huge performances to help his team achieve the ultimate goal. That's clutch if you ask me. But now that we got all the factors out of the way, it's time for the conclusion. Sadly, when it's all said and done, Tim Duncan's legacy will always be hurt by his lack of flashiness and eye-popping numbers. Because there are no numbers to measure how many shots you altered, how many drives you cut off, and how much he made his teammates better. Tim Duncan was the team's anchor, their emotional leader, smartest player, crunch time scorer, and most competitive player on the court. He was a superstar that couldn't simply have his greatness measured in stats alone. He was a winner by all accounts as well as a leader. When Tim Duncan retired, the commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, had this to say: His understated selflessness made him the ultimate teammate. Tim Duncan didn't lead by yelling at his teammates, blaming others for their team's mistakes, or by throwing people under the bus, but by example. In the history of basketball, no one except for Bill Russell's Celtics has had such a stretch of sustained dominance or has been as good for as long as Tim Duncan's Spurs were. San Antonio's success started and ended with Tim Duncan. From the time Timmy got drafted in 1997 to the time he retired in 2016. He was the cornerstone of the most successful NBA franchise of the 21st century. Tim Duncan and the Spurs defined what winning culture looks like in modern sports. Sometimes, I wonder if it seems like nobody remembers or cares about Tim Duncan, and I realize it's because his dominance was just so boring. No one wants to see a team win over and over again, dominate year after year, and crush all other competition. But that's exactly what Tim Duncan did. Tim was everything you could want from a great basketball player. He defended, he dominated on offense, he made his teammates better, you could trust him in big moments, and most importantly, he won. That's why Tim Duncan will forever be remembered as an all-time great. And if you ask me, that's why Tim Duncan has a legitimate case for being the greatest basketball player of all time. Now I leave it up to you. Do you think Tim Duncan is the greatest player of all time? And if not, let me know why and where you'd rank him on the all-time list. While you're there, please consider hitting the like button to show your support and subscribe to stay up to date with the best basketball content. But as always, until next time, cheers.